Good day. My name is David Wild, and this is the third part of a four-part lecture on Chapter 10 on innovation and change in Connect Master Management 2.0. Let's begin by talking about implementing change in organizations. Innovation requires companies to adapt and change, and there are many barriers for them to overcome. Organizational change is any alteration in a company's structures, people, and processes. For changes to be effective, leaders must guide several processes of organizational change. External consultants may also take an active role in diagnosing problems in organizations, in understanding the types of changes needed, and in carrying out interventions. Lower-level managers also play a number of critical roles in initiating, as well as implementing, innovation and change in organizations. There are many barriers to change in organizations, including the following that you see in Figure 5 drawn from your text, which are examples of barriers to innovation and change. Let's talk about each of these individually. First, lack of awareness. The need for change often stems from a new way of doing business that originates in the firm's external environment. Therefore, the need for change may be off the company's radar. This might include changing customer needs and wants, new technologies that are being developed, or even new regulations. If firms wait to respond to these changes until other firms are already taking away sales, it can be too late to respond effectively. Next, uncertainty. Often the direction and magnitude of change will be unclear to decision makers. When uncertainty exists, it can be difficult for managers to know what investments to make, and this can lead to paralysis. It is even more difficult when the organization faces more than one uncertainty at the same time, because this makes it hard to analyze multiple uncertainties and to know what to do. Next, a barrier to innovation and change lies in co-innovation risk. More and more, companies don't innovate alone, but depend upon the innovations of others in what is called a business ecosystem. This suggests that firms need to understand their interdependencies with other innovators when developing new products. Alternatively, they need to focus on innovations that don't put them in a position that depends on other firms' innovations. Next, we have adoption chain risk. Innovations sometimes fail because of other bottlenecks, despite the fact that a new product or service would be very valuable to customers. Companies developing an innovation need to consider how other firms using that product or service will be affected, even before the innovation is made available to the end user. The challenge for companies is not only do they have to make changes to their own organizations, but they also have to see to it that other organizations in their ecosystems are willing and able to change also. Next, organizational rigidity. Creative destruction suggests that firms need to be much more agile. This means that in today's business environment, it will be more difficult for firms to develop a sustainable competitive advantage based on what has worked well in the past. Exploitation is a broad term that captures some less flexible approaches to pursuing short-term profits. It is internally focused. It emphasizes getting better at what we do, rewards consistency, focuses on rules and discipline, prizes hitting the numbers and performance today, and has a low tolerance for ambiguity. Firms following an exploitation approach can become rigid in the face of a need for change. They don't consider the need to change in order to grow, learn, and pursue new ways of doing business for longer-term success. In order to overcome this rigidity, companies are encouraged to embrace more of an exploration approach to management, which is the opposite of exploitation. It means having more of an external focus, being experimental, emphasizing new initiatives, focusing on learning new things, rewarding proactivity, sharing information, and adapting quickly. Ambidextrous organizations are those that have elements of both approaches, either in separate departments or in individual managers who have developed skills in both sets of activities. Next, we'll highlight individual resistance to change. Managers and other employees resist change brought about by shifts in the environment, but they also might resist changes that have internal origins. These can include a change in the firm's strategy, such as when the firm restructures the business or alters its priorities in allocating resources. Other changes might include shifts in culture following a large-scale acquisition or merger. Employees can resist change because the change might reduce their own employment opportunities or lead to a reduction in their status in an organization after an acquisition or merger occurs. Management consultants have identified a number of sources of individual resistance to change. You can see a listing of those in Table 2 taken from your text, which is shown on your screen. Some of these sources of resistance to change are not providing a clear vision, direction, and priorities, a lack of leadership to inspire and to engage employees, a lack of strong project management with no clear accountability and roles, no engagement and/or buy-in among the key stakeholders, no clear roadmap being provided for coordinating the change process. People issues are not defined or addressed, so employees adopt a, quote, let's just sit it out attitude. People are not involved in developing quick wins and communicating them to build credibility for the change. Successes are not recognized, communicated, and/or celebrated in order to increase the pace of change. And finally, progress is not measured and learning is not reviewed as the steps needed to sustain the change. When we talk about implementing change in organizations, we have to look at the processes of organizational change. When organizations seek to make changes and overcome barriers to change, they need to proceed through several stages. As you can see in Figure 6 on your screen, there's generally 3 stages to the process of organizational change. These processes of organizational change are intended to address some of the behavioral and attitudinal barriers to change in organizations and the individuals who work for them. Now, the Figure 6 that you see on your screen is taken from Lewin's popular model of planned organizational change that involves 3 steps. Unfreezing is the first stage and makes people aware of the need for change. Now, benchmarking entails getting data on a company's performance and comparing it with other firms to see where the company falls short or where it's excelling. Changing is the intervention during which employees begin to experiment with new behaviors and learn the new skills needed. Refreezing, the third stage, occurs when the organizational change starts to become the new normal in the company. Cotter has developed a set of 8 steps of organizational change related to Lewin's unfreezing, changing, and refreezing stages. His model emphasizes that leadership is a critical component of organizational change and summarizes the key action items that leaders need to take to achieve in each of the 3 stages of organizational change. According to Cotter's 8-step model, during the unfreezing stage, leaders need to do 4 things. First, to establish a sense of urgency, to demonstrate a compelling reason why change is required. Second, to create a guiding coalition to establish a cross-functional group that has the power to carry out change across the organization. Third, to develop a vision and strategy to create a vision that makes it clear how the change fits within the firm's overall strategy. Fourth, to communicate this plan consistently, to develop an approach to disseminate the plan to both internal and external stakeholders. During the changing stage, leaders need to take three specific actions, according to Cotter. First, to empower broad-based action, to encourage employees to take risk and engage in creative problem solving. Second, to generate short-term wins. These early successes will demonstrate that organizational change is succeeding. And thirdly, to consolidate gains and produce more change, to resolve problems encountered during the change process so that success increases and the change program doesn't lose momentum. Finally, during Lewin's refreezing stage, leaders focus on one overarching goal, according to Cotter, and this is to reinforce the change. Leaders need to demonstrate how the change is leading to organizational success and work to embed the change in the organization. So, in summary, when leaders implement change in organizations, they encounter a number of barriers. These include a simple lack of awareness of the need to change, uncertainty, resistance by other firms on whom the organization relies, such as other innovators, customers, and more, rigidity, and resistance of individuals threatened by the change. Leaders need to go through a process that involves unfreezing the organization, making changes, and then refreezing the organization. Cotter's 8-step model of organizational change provides an action plan for leaders and indicates all the steps they must perform well for an organizational change to be effective and successful. And with that, we'll end the third part of our 4-part lecture on innovation and change.